Alright, welcome to Thread Therapy. Today we are learning the single crochet, and I'm using some super bulky yarn as my training yarn. I'm using a size N or 9mm crochet hook. I have switched areas where I'm filming, so hopefully my lighting is a little bit better. So let's dive right into it. So there's 15 chains that we're starting with. That's going to be very important, so make sure you know how many chains that you started with. When you're first starting practicing, or if you're learning a new stitch, we make things called swatches. And what that is basically just a practice piece. Swatches should be about 4 inches by 4 inches at the minimum. And swatches are made so that you can measure your gauge and make sure that it matches the gauge in the pattern. I'll do a short video on gauge in the future so you can understand how to do that. But don't throw your swatches away, because there's lots of things that you can do with those, such as if you save them all up, you can put them together and make a blanket or pot holders. So they have their functions. I'm sure there's more ideas you can find on Pinterest or Ravelry. By the way, I'm going to do a Ravelry video, just a whole video on Ravelry. I love that site. If you haven't checked it out, Ravelry.com. Set your account up and just go in there and explore. And I need to explain something important to you just for future reference. See how the chains look like little V's? Okay, so when you're holding your work, they're going to be pointing to the left like an arrow. See how that works? The top up here on this side is your back stitch. The front down here is your front stitch. So you have back, front. That will be important for making textures and ribbing patterns later on. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, there's already a chain stitch video, so you can go in there and look at that. Let's see. So what you're going to do, you're going to count from the hook. So there's number 1. There's 2. We're going to work into that second chain. We're going into the front loop of that second chain. Why do we go into the second chain? Because you're going to have what's called a turning chain that'll allow you the space to be able to function with your stitch. The turning chain, the type of stitch that you're doing determines how many turning chains you have. So the turning chain is going to be the side of your work. It's going up the side. That's what makes it grow. And it has to correspond with the height of the stitch that you're doing. So with single crochet, it's 1 chain high or tall. Hope that made sense. Okay, what we're going to do, instead of yarning over like we did when we were making a chain, we're just going to leave that chain right there on the hook, and we're going to go 1, 2 into the front loop of that second chain right there. See? Watch where my hook goes. Alright, so now I'm sticking down through the chain, and what I'm going to do when I'm down there, I'm going to yarn over. So that just means I'm going to grab this with my hook. It kind of went behind, see that? And I'm going to pull it through that front loop on the chain only. So now I have 2 loops on my hook. What you're going to do now, as you're holding this chain, you're holding your working yarn kind of behind your chain, you're going to yarn over and pull it through both loops on your hook. So watch how that works. So I'm going to grab that yarn and pull it through. There. So now you have single crochet. It kind of looks like a little V. See? A little V with a hat on, I guess you could call it. Alright, let's do that again, in case I went too fast or you didn't understand something. Alright, so chain 1, turning chain, chain 2, starting chain. I'm going to take my hook. I'm going to go in through the front chain, see, through the front chain. I'm going to grab my working yarn and pull it through. So now there's 2. I'm going to yarn over, the yarn is behind your chain, and pull it through both chains on the hook. When you're finished with a stitch, you should only have 1 loop on your hook. That's any stitch you ever do. Alright, so I'm going to work a few of these so you can watch me. So we'll go into the next chain. I'm going into that front loop. I'm going to the right of the working yarn, I'm pulling that up, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull it through both of them. So now I have 2 little V's with a hat. So I'm going to keep going just so you can see the functionality of that. You just keep going all the way down your chain. This is why it's important that your starting chain is worked loosely. Otherwise, you're going to have trouble getting that hook down in there, and it can, if it's too tight, it will make your entire piece warped. So I think all beginners struggle with the tension that they're putting and how loosely they work their work. Don't work it tightly, you do it loosely, and it's going to take some experimenting. So it's just like learning anything else, it takes some time and practice, and hopefully at the end of it you'll have a lifelong hobby that you can enjoy. And don't worry about how other people do it, as long as you're getting the basic mechanics of it right. You know, you may go on YouTube and see somebody just flying down through there, just crocheting up a storm. Well, if you're starting out, you're not there yet, so don't let that intimidate you. You go as fast or as slow as you're happy with, and to get your work accurate, or whatever makes you happy, because that's what it's all about. All right, we're down to the end. All right, the end one can kind of be funny because of that starting knot. Okay, so now we're to the end of our work. We got a nice little row there of little V's. Trying to be conscious of my lighting, sorry. All right, now so how do we make it grow? Where do we go from here? Okay, this is where the term turning chain is going to mean something to you. Okay, so now we're going to have to do what's called turn our work. So we've gone this way, and you always work right to left when you're crocheting. Okay, so right to left. So we're going to have to turn our work so that we can continue working right and left, and to increase our length. So what we're going to do is we're to the end of our single crochet row, we're going to chain 1. Okay, so we're holding our working yarn, it's behind the hook. We're going to yarn over, but we're going under that yarn. You see that? Just like a regular chain. And we're going to pull that through that loop on the hook. And there we are with our 1 stitch on the hook, which means we've completed all of our parts to our stitch. And we have a chain 1. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take this work and we're going to turn it to the left. And the way you turn it determines how smooth your edges are. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. Okay, so once you've turned that single crochet, do we crochet into that first chain on our loop? No, that's our turning chain. Remember, same as before. We're going to crochet into the top of the first single crochet, and you can kind of tell I'm going to take my hook out for a minute because this is kind of weird. All right, so we have our chain 1, and then we have, let me turn this way. Here's our chain 1. Here's the top of our first single crochet, and if you notice, the top of the single crochets look like a chain, just like your chain stitch, like a little V or a little arrow that's pointing to the left. If you if all of your little arrows are pointing to the left and you're working right to left, you know you're going in the right direction, okay? So arrows to the left. So that's our turning chain. This is from the side. This is the first single crochet. And they look like little men standing there. So the front look like little V's, the back looks like little men. So it'll have like leg, leg, then that's his belt. That's what I call them. I don't know if that helps or not. See if I can get closer. It's hard to tell how my camera's looking. Leg, leg, and the belt. So you're going to be crocheting on the second row in between, you can see these little spaces here. And you're going to go through the solid thickness. You're going to stick it through there, and it's going to be going all the way through that chain to the other side. You'll have an entire arrow that you've gone underneath. So each one of these little holes is where you're going to be doing your work on the second row. All right, so I'm going to go back on the hook and we're going to find that first hole right there. See the little man? See his little legs? Okay, and you're going to go all the way through. So I went through the whole thickness, and my working yarn's on the left this time because my hook came up funny. You can't do it that way, it's going to make a knot. So I'm going to pull that through both thicknesses, and I'm going to keep both loops on my hook. We haven't completed the stitch yet, so there's two loops on the hook. Now my working yarn's behind my hook, so when I go to pick that up, I'm going to go down and under it from the left to the right. Yarn over and pull that through both loops, leaving one loop on my hook, meaning my stitch is complete, and there we are with a single crochet. That's the front view of single crochet. So if you notice, as you turn your work, you're going to have a row that's the back and a row that's the front. And it's not really going to matter, but you, after time, you can look at your work and tell which row's facing you and which one's not. So let's go into the second single crochet. We're going to put our hook all the way through, and you see the little arrow pointing to the left? Once again, going to the right of that working yarn underneath, hooking it and pulling it through both thicknesses, 2 loops on my hook. Not finished until there's 1 loop on the hook, so we're going under that working yarn from the left to the right, hooking, pulling it through both loops, 1 loop on my hook, stitch completed. So now we have 2 single crochets. And let's just continue across so you can see how that works. So you can see how this big chunky yarn really helps when you're trying to show how to do something. And you may want to start with this big bulky yarn just so you can get the mechanics down, because it's gonna be awkward new movements that you're learning. And when it's like writing. When you start writing, you have those big fat pencils. Same thing with knitting or crochet. Get you a big fat hook and some big fat yarn and just practice. Now I made the mistake, well maybe not a mistake, when I first started crocheting, the first thing I ever saw that was crocheted was a doily, a lace doily. So that's the first thing I made with a size 20 thread and a steel crochet hook. Don't do that unless you're just really brave, because that's a challenge. Alright, this last one's kind of tricky. You still have the little arrow pointing to the left, and you just kind of have to get it on both those stitches because it gets weird on the ends. Same thing, you're gonna go underneath that working yarn, go to the right to the left to hook it, pull it through. There, now we have 2 rows. Look at there. Now you always want to count how many chains you started with, and that's how many stitches you should end with on every row. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 stitches. So when I finish row 3, row 4, row 50, there should be 15 stitches. And if there's more or less, you've done something incorrectly. All right, so let's do one more turn so I can show you what that's going to look like. So remember, we're at the end. We've got to make it go taller. So we're going to chain 1. That's like going up an elevator, and it's going to be the beginning of our next row. You kind of see it looks like the wall of that next row, and it's going to go from left to right. See how that's going to, okay. Just think of it like the starting wall. All right, but remember, we got to work right to left, so we're going to turn our work to the left, just like that. Just flip it over. Now, if you go, let's just say for whatever reason you went and you turned it this way, it's going to make the side look funny. So every time you're holding your work and you've done your turning chain, I'm all over the place, turn it that way. All right, so now we see the little holes that we're going to work into right there. We're going to go into that first hole, double thickness, and we're going to do our first single crochet. All right, so I'm going to work this swatch up for a little bit so you can see that. Then maybe we'll go into gauge. All right, so I've finished my swatch, and here's a trick you can do. Just take your hook, pull that loop way up, and you can take your hook off. That way you have all that extra. It's a slight possibility. It's going to hold your work so that you can get up and walk and do whatever, and you're not losing hooks. Okay, so we finished our swatch. How many stitches did we end with? Well, let's count them. Let's count wait a minute, let me hold it the right way so the arrows are going, pointing to the left. Let's count. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yay, success! Started with 15, ended with 15. Okay, now we're going to talk about gauge. So, why is gauge important? Gauge is important if you are working specific pieces of clothing that you want to get the correct size. Sorry, I had to move my camera there. Or if you have a project that calls for one ball of yarn, or if you only have one skein of yarn and you don't feel like running to the store because it's Sunday afternoon, you just want to sit on your butt, you're going to want to know gauge. Am I going to have enough yarn to finish this project? Because I know I work looser than what the gauge usually tells you to do. Here's how you find out. Remember this nifty little thing from my other video? All right, that's where these are very important. So you're going to want to lay this down on your work where you can see the rows and stitches through the little window. So let's find the beginning of a row. We'll just lay it right there. Let's see. We'll start at the beginning of the second row. See how the rows have like that little valley right there? So I'm going to lay that right on that little valley on the edge of a line of stitches, and I'm going to count. So, wait a minute. See where the measuring starts? That's on that little valley. So this is 2 inches. Swatches should be 4 inches because your patterns are always going to say 3 rows in 4 inches and 4 stitches in 4 inches. This is only 2 inches. Well, you're not going to get all that because this is such a large pattern. I'm going to show you a trick to that here in a minute. So let's count. All right, here's a row of stitches. So there's 1. Wait a minute. Get my bearings. Okay, so this is where you got to learn the difference between what the front of the stitch looks like and the back of the stitch looks like. Let me get my hook. So here's a row. You see he's got, this is a back of a row because it looks like the little man standing. See his little legs and his belt. So there's 1 row. The second row is the front of a row facing you because we see the little V's. So that's second row. You're counting in between. The valley is between 2 rows. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 rows in 2 inches. Okay? So if our pattern's calling for that, then you're golden. All right, so now we've got to count how many stitches are in there. So put that to where the side of your stitch is there. So how many stitches do we have in 2 inches? We have 1, 2, 3, 4.5. And the way it's laying, I'm counting the little belt on the little man standing there. All right, so that's how you do that and count. Now, you can also use a framing square. Yay, you can get these at Home Depot. Same thing. In fact, this might be better. It's got kind of a glare on it. Let's see if I fix that. All right. So what you're going to do with this, you're going to, right here in the bend, yeah, I like this better. You're going to find the edge of your stitches and the top of a row. And now you can just count. Because see, you have all the inches. You have 4 inches right there, and you know what? There we go. Let's do it. All the way from the bottom. Now we're going to count how many stitches are in 4 inches. And that's going to work out better when your pattern asks for how many stitches and rows in 4 inches. So let's start with our stitches. All right, I'm going to count across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 stitches in 4 inches. So if that's what they're calling for in your pattern, you're golden. Your yarn size, your hook size, and the way you hold the tension on the yarn determines your gauge. Let's count the rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 rows in 4 inches. So 8 stitches in 4 inches, 10 rows. If that's what your pattern says, you are good to go. I hope that cleared some things up with you as far as single crochets and how to measure gauge. Good luck, happy crocheting, and practice, practice.